Hello, hello, hello. Let's move on to this screen here. How are we doing? Welcome back to the Jack Ward Football Podcast. Hopefully you're well, and welcome to a afternoon, evening Sunday stream. I thought we had to do something to make up for the fact that, of course, there are no roundups. It's a strange thing. Still trying to get my head around it, but we are, of course, here to bring you content on this Sunday evening in some way, and that will include today a tier list ranking every single League One manager this campaign. So lots to dive into. 24 managers to touch on. Of course, we will be doing it in a classic tier list system. The systems never change. We don't change the systems here on the Jack Wood Football Podcast. Beginning with, let's begin with going through the different tiers. Before we do that, welcome to the stream. Welcome to hopefully something a little bit interesting, breaking down some really interesting and managerial experiences that we've seen and seen the pathways to, if you like, across this League One campaign. The live chat will be extremely helpful because that will be sometimes a swaying factor into which direction we go and which manager goes into which tier. Matthew Bell, hello, how are you doing, Matthew? Good to be good that you're here, and it's good that we are here to discuss lots of different talking points. Lawrence Smith says Dean Holden's Red Army. Before we go, who is the best manager? Before we do who's the best manager and we just fire like that, let's break down the tiers. You can see on the screen now. These are the tiers. They've gone, for some reason, they've reset. But in fact, that makes it easier. We can run through them as we go. So these are the ones we're going to go with. The bottom tier is going to be Forget It Happened. Live creation. For some reason, it has reset. The next one above that is going to be Below Par. The middle tier is going to be, I was going to go Reasonable, but I think I've changed that on the spot. I'm going to go Solid. I'm going to go Very Good. I'm going to go Manager of the Year nominee. There we go. So that is what we're going to go with. That is how we're going to roll. Those are going to be the different tiers. 5 categories and tiers in total. Of course, you can see the bottom of the screen. We've got all 24 managers. These are the managers that ended the season with that club. So some of them have been sacked. Michael Jackson has been sacked. I know Darrell Clark wasn't literally the right manager, the final manager at Port Vale, but we could have gone with the caretaker, but it was about 3 games. It didn't make sense. We've gone with Clark, of course. He is no longer the Port Vale manager. Everybody else, I believe, is still in a job and they haven't left or been sacked. So that's correct. That's what we're going to go with. 24 managers. Get involved. The live chat is going to be on the side of me as well, so you can fire in your thoughts and fire where we're going to start. We're going to begin with Ian Evatt of Bolton Wanderers because I also think that's going to be quite interesting, especially with the recent the game between Bolton and Barnsley in that playoff semi-final, in particular that second leg that did knock them out of the playoff campaign. Difficult for them, difficult for them to deal with because I think, to be honest, they have had a really, really good season on the whole, but certain aspects have been quite frustrating and ultimately have let them down. In particular, I think that goal scoring and attacking output has been a big problem for Bolton this season. I think we saw in that second leg that all come to fruition because there was a real blunt and quite slow attack, and generally the offensive play wasn't very good, and Barnsley didn't have to create too much to go through and progress to the final. Fair play to Barnsley. We'll come on to Michael Duff later on in the episode. But speaking about Ian Evatt and speaking about what he's done at Bolton, I mean, on the whole, it's been fantastic. But focusing on this season, I think it's been very good. I would say it's still been very good. They are very, very competitive. They have been competitive. They've defensively been fantastic. They were in the top 6. Again, it was going to be a really tough and quite difficult tie between themselves and Barnsley to call. And actually watching it, it was a real battle between two really competitive, but different styles. One high press, one more direct. But again, some really, really interesting elements. And that was going to be a fantastic tie. And we saw, I think, Barnsley's and Bolton's, I think, really, really good talent come through in over those 2 games. So it was going to be, it almost showed what Bolton were good at. I think defensively being fairly good. I know they conceded 2 goals over the 2 games, but I still feel as though going forward that they could have been better. But I think on the whole, Ian Evatt has been a really, really good manager this season. I think Bolton have been a really good side. So lots to improve on over the summer, of course, because they're going to want to get out of League One at least next season. That's going to be the aim. Of course, just stumbling at the final hurdle this time around. So I'm going to go with, let's bring the live chat up so we can sort of get your thoughts in here as well. We've got Duff on here as well. Who we got? Probably very good, but there's been some really poor results when Bolton needed it most. Interesting. Where would you put very good? We've got here for Matthew Bell. Yeah, get your thoughts in right now for Michael Duff. What we're going to go with? What we're going to go with Michael Duff? Where will we put him? I'm going to go very good, but of course you can give your thoughts. That's going to be exciting and interesting, and give a bit of a dynamic to it. This will be going up as a video as well, so you can get involved in the comment section. But where will we go if we're going to do this live in the chat? I probably would go very good. Intrigued to see what you've got to say. Let's move on to Darren Ferguson of Peterborough United. Of course, in fact, I think I've got his points per game. And I've got Everton as well. His points per game, by the way, was 1.76. Peterborough's Darren Ferguson, of course, didn't start as the manager. He took over from Grant McCann. 1.91 was Darren Ferguson, but of course he did join midway through the season. 77 points Peterborough finished on in the end. So look, and also he got them into a playoff semi-final. Of course, that semi-final was one of the best semi-finals and probably the best ever games of football, especially that second leg. Not so much for Peterborough, but getting them into that situation and getting them into a really, really encouraging position with a chance to be promoted, where at one point looked like it was going to be a real challenge, was a great achievement. Of course, how it ended and where it got and how it's finished hasn't been as good. And I think his future will be up in the air. But I think every time he is Peterborough manager, his future is up in the air. Was Ferguson a good reappointment, Matthew? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that is true. I don't know. Was he? That's why we're doing this. But I think that is a really good point. He is always back. And he has delivered, you'd say. Michael Duff has done very, very well. We'll come on to Michael Duff later on. Peterborough have done well. Yeah, I think it is still very good for me. I think it is still very good. It's difficult because if they got to the final, you probably would put into almost, I don't think he'd win it, but you could almost put him into Manager of the Year nominee, but he hasn't been there all season and they did just make the playoffs. So that would be maybe a little bit of a push. I still think it's very good. I wouldn't change it to solid just because of that last game, because you look at the grand scheme of things, how he's come in and transformed that side into, like I said, a playoff pushing side. You'd say that definitely does deserve to be in the top end of these tiers. So I would still go very good for Darren Ferguson. I think he has brought back the feel-good factor, but not so much last Thursday. So that's probably how I would assess that. But where would you put Darren Ferguson? Let me know in the comment section and in the live chat. I'm going to go very good for him. I think it's solid as with the squad. As the squad, they have a very good manager that could get them up. Yeah, maybe it could be solid. It could be solid, but I think that might be slightly unfair and might be taking that second game against Wednesday into too much consideration potentially. Right, next up, Harris is in here, and I think it's only right that we then move on to the next one. Of course, and we've got Gary Caldwell of Exeter City, joined midway through the season, of course, took over from Matt Taylor, who moved on to Rotherham United. I have got his points per game here as well, 1.26 points per game, so it's okay. You want to sort of be hitting the 1.3, 1.4 if you can. If you can push to 1.5, I think anything above that is really good. I mean, we'll come on to the likes of Stephen Schumacher and McKenna and go through their points per game because that does set a different bar. But when you look at Gary Caldwell and you look at Exeter, 1.13 is still fairly good. They had a really difficult end to the season and some quite dodgy runs across that. But you know, he took over what was going to be a really interesting challenge and quite a difficult challenge, really. When you look at a real Matt Taylor squad there, the one that got promoted into League One initially, had to take over and actually had to keep them in the league. And he did do that, of course. And also, I wouldn't say at any point you feared Exeter to go down. So I'd say he's done a good job. I'd say solid for Gary Caldwell. There were some difficult results and some quite long runs without wins and some, I think, 5+ defeats on the trot, which is never good for a manager. But I think on the whole, he came into Exeter. I think a lot of people thought this could be really difficult, but he had a really good January transfer window. He definitely did get backed, and they were playing some really good stuff. Defensively, sometimes a little bit dubious, but I think generally, look, they were safe for sound, and that's going to be important. So I'm going to go solid. It could even be very good, but I think that might be going a little bit too far. I'm going to go solid. He's definitely in there. He's had a good, and that is what solid is. He's had a good season as Exeter manager, or half season, should I say. Solid for sure, says Uzil. That's very, very good. Very good. It's very hard to fit in the last manager and their own form, especially with no Brown. That is important as well. You know, he has had sort of absentees, and again, there have been players that, you know, for various reasons, I know have not been part of that team, and big players that are a big part of the reason why they got into the league, and also, you know, crucial players under Matt Taylor as well. That is true. But I'd say some quite long runs that have been, you know, difficult. So I would go solid. It's definitely the top end of solid. Harris put solid. Yeah, I think we've had Giovanni for a second half of the season. Our points per game would have been higher, to be honest. I think 1.13 is, that's what I said, I think. That's still fairly good. It could be higher, but it's still fairly good. I'd say solid as well, says Oliver. Good. Right, let's go there. Let's move on to Derek Adams of Morecambe. To be honest, I think there's going to be a little bit of a trend when we speak about managers that, of course, relegate their football club. With Morecambe, it's difficult because they've had to deal with quite a few tricky things off the field, financial troubles that could be more of an issue going forward into next season when they'll be competing in League Two. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how they deal with that, and could be quite worrying. I know their retain list came out quite early on in this off-season. Cole Stockton's been released, and a bunch of really, really good, promising names that have been a big part of Morecambe, and especially in the season last year when they stayed up, where a lot of people thought they wouldn't. This season, it was a step too far. I think we saw that squad just was not capable and didn't have enough League One talent in there. And ultimately, that did cost them. And that's the problem. Yeah, that did cost them. It cost them because that squad wasn't really fit enough when it comes to fit enough, not literally fit enough in terms of fitness, but in terms of fit enough to stay in the league when it comes to that attacking, defensive, and just all-round League One quality. And we saw the real drop-off in that Morecambe side. At one point, I thought they could just claw their way out of it, but like I said, it was just too much for them. They have been relegated. To be honest, it's got to be forget it even happened, hasn't it? I think it probably has done. Let me know, Morecambe manager Derek Adams, where would you put him? Live chat and in the comments below. I would probably say forget it happened. I know it's harsh. Matt says, good evening, sir. How are you, Matt? I'm probably going to go forget it even happened. I probably am, because he did relegate Morecambe. Difficult circumstances, of course, maybe out of his control, but still, it hasn't been great, has it? So, yeah, I'm going to go with the bottom tier there. Potentially harsh. Do let me know. So let's go to Joey Barton of Bristol Rovers. Where are we going to go with Joey Barton? Of course, a fiery figure, you could say, on and off the pitch now as a manager, of course, as well. I've got his points per game, 1.15, 53 points finished in the end. Of course, did get promoted into League One ahead of this season. So it's their first season back in League One after that relegation a couple of years ago. So it was going to be a season where staying up was priority. And if they could push higher and into the top half, that could be, that would be seen as a good season. And at one point, I thought they were going to do that. Ultimately, it wasn't the case. A real drop-off, you'd say, especially in that second half of the season. At one point, they were hovering around that top 6 and hovering especially around that top 10. But like I said, a damaging drop-off. Key players like Aaron Collins, when he dropped off form, I think we saw Bristol Rovers drop form, and that was the issue they had. Collins, I think, had 27 goal contributions this season, won the EFL Player of the Season. Not everybody's choice, not mine, but of course, fantastic numbers and a great player. When we saw his numbers drop off and his attacking numbers drop off, I think we saw that real talisman affect the performance of the entire side. Of course, real quality in that side. And Joe Barton, again, Marmite is one word I'd say to describe him. Some people love him. I think if he is part of your setup as a player or manager, you probably do feel as though he's that passionate character that you want. Against you, not so much. And he did get them back into League One, which will still be remembered. I think if it's a bad season next season or a bad start to the season, he could be in a little bit of trouble because there is quality in that squad. And a slight difference when we look at teams that have been promoted. I think Bristol Rovers still do have a better squad than a lot because of that quite big fan base they've got for, out of all the sides that come up, and when you compare it to quite a few in League One. And also, they have got that ability to attract players still. So I would still go, to be honest with you, it's either solid or below par. I probably would go below par. Without Aaron Collins, Rovers will go down, to Jacob in detail. I think you're true, mate. I think that is a true fact. Stevie says, good evening, Jack. How are you doing, Stevie? Hopefully you're well, mate. Where would you put Joey Barton? Where would we put Joey Barton? I've put him in below par. I think it is a below par season. But I'd be intrigued to see what you've got to say. People might disagree, and that is exactly what it's all about. That's the fun of it. That's why we do it live. I'm going to go below par for that one. I feel Colwell did fairly well under the circumstances. Below par at worst. Yeah, that's why I've put him in solid, mate. I agree. That's fair. Yeah, I think I'm going to go below par. Slightly harsh potentially, but I'm going to stick to my guns and go below par for Joey Barton. Let's move on to Mark Bonner. And this one is a really interesting one because Mark Bonner, for a lot of the season, found his Cambridge United side in that bottom 4. And if they got relegated, it's definitely below par. Probably, if we're being totally honest, forget it even happened. And I've been very vocal about my thoughts about Mark Bonner across this season and last season. I think he did a fantastic job in League One when they got promoted a couple of seasons ago, and their first season back in League One last year, I thought was really, really good. They're playing a brilliant brand of football. Joe Ironside, of course, has now moved over to Bolton, but I think he was a crucial player on the left side. Sam Smith was back in goals, as he has been this season. Joe Ironside, slight drop off this season, but last season was fantastic. Harvey Nibbs, I think not so much this season, much better last season. And that's a bit of a story of Cambridge. Has it been second season syndrome? Look at the league position, you probably would have to argue that is the case. But he kept them up. But he did keep them up, and that is where things change. He didn't relegate them. A miracle on the final day meant that Cambridge will be competing in League One next season, and Mark Bonner was the manager for that circumstance and for that event and that fantastic achievement. So suddenly, you can actually jump up probably 2 tiers. I want to put him in solid. With the resources Mark has, he's done a solid job, in my opinion. Good run at the end. Underdogs for sure. I think that end of season form, that ultimately, the bottom line is that end of season form kept them in the league. That was survival form. You'd have to say that is or has been a solid season for him as a manager. Solid or below par as well. Bonner has done well with a small budget compared to everybody else. Boards backed him, and he gave us the results we need. I think you're right. I think we saw with Mark Bonner, what we saw with Cambridge and how they dealt with the situation that, let's be honest, was a little bit nervy at one point. Very nervy. They were in that bottom four by not a large amount of points, but for a large amount of time, to be honest. But they backed him. And loyalty, I think we saw, was a really key factor in the reason why Mark Bonner has been successful. And I think we'll learn a lot and become a much better manager next season. If he has, of course, he's not going to have millions of pounds to spend, but if he can be, again, aggressive and be clever when it comes to recruitment and learn, and I think, once again, I come back to lessons learned and mistakes and improving as a manager through difficult times, I think that next season could be better and more like the one a couple of seasons ago. I'm going to go solid for Mark Bonner. People might joke about it because I have got a little bit of an ongoing affection for Mark Bonner and the way that I think he has been fantastic since he jumped into League One a couple of seasons ago, but I'd still say it's solid. Cambridge are in better shape with Morecambe, off the field for sure. I was going to say that, but I thought it would be so influenced on what happened on the final day. There should be a tier above nominee, surely, for Stephen Schumacher. I was thinking about we could do, in fact, it's a really good point. Matt Hayes has just put in there as well. I know we have got Manager of the Year nominee, but I'm going to go with, at the end of the episode, we will do our Manager of the Year. I think we know who it's going to be, but we will decide a Manager of the Year. But I wanted to put a couple of names in there and not make it so there was about 17 different tiers. Of course, not every manager, in a weird way, will fit exactly into one of these tiers, but it's fun to try and put these different managers in and make almost difficult decisions, but hopefully some good conversation. I'm going to go solid for Cambridge. I know it sounds silly because they only just stayed up by the skin of their teeth, and Mark Bonner was a part of that throughout the entire season. But I still think that he guided them to what was a final day piece of brilliance in them staying in the league. I'm going to go solid. Loyalty gets rewarded, as we saw with Cambridge as well. Right, then let's move to Fleetwood. Scott Brown, of course, he joined at the end of last season, or in the summer of last season, should I say. Didn't manage any games last year. First full season in management. So it was going to be really fascinating. A lot of people thought Fleetwood were going to struggle. You can watch my reaction to my predictions. I actually didn't quite agree with that. I thought they would be fine. In fact, I got them spot on. 13th is where they did finish. I believe it might have been 12th. I think it is 13th, though. It's either one of those. Scott Brown, 1.26 points per game, 58 points. So you'd say it's been solid. Has the football been as good? I get to speak to Ben and Cod's vlogs on a regular basis, and he was saying that, look, to be honest, they have been, of course, much improved. They were safe far earlier than they were a couple of seasons ago, and especially last season when they just stayed up through goal difference. So it was going to have to be an improvement, but anything other than relegation was going to be improvement. And they didn't want to be in a battle. They didn't want to be in a relegation battle. And safety was the importance. And it was in a fairly early fashion as well. So you'd say with Scott Brown, encouraging. He was backed. I think that's important to say as well. Jenny Stockley came in, Jack Merritt came in, Vale came in, just to name a few. There are more, of course, but those are the ones that just sort of stand out and come to my mind straight away. Look, he has done very, very well. I'd say it's solid. That's where I'm going to go with that. It's a solid season. First season in management. goes one of two ways. I think he has learned a lot. I think there's definitely things to improve on. Defensively, they look much better going forward. Their home form of things, I think, will need to be adjusted and improved, and that will come over time. So I'm going to go solid for Scott Brown. Kept them in the league, no issue. Solid for Scott Brown, says Ozil, good mid-table finish. Very good and incredible, loads of great results. Yeah, maybe. He's definitely solid. He's probably the higher end of solid. These aren't in order of in sort of if they're close to jumping up, that would take for years. But if I was going to say it, I think he probably is at the top end and the upper echelons, if you like, of the solid tier. Right then, by the way, we've got 78 people watching right now. I understand this video is good for interactivity, but also it is a video that will stay on the channel and people will watch over time. So the live numbers are a little bit, well, it was a bit of an experiment to see if people were willing to get involved. And they really have got involved. So thank you very, very much. Please make sure, if you are watching, you leave a like and subscribe. It helps very much with the reach and with other people getting involved. If we can get to 100 people at one point during the stream, that would be fantastic. If we can't, fine. Don't worry about it. But of course, it would be fantastic if you are watching right now to leave a like. So let's move on to Darrell Clarke. Again, interesting one because he is actually the Port Vale manager now. He did get sacked. First half of the season, really good. Second half, post-Christmas, not so good. And that's when we saw, I think, Port Vale tumble down a couple of positions because at one point, they're around 11th and 10th, which, of course, for Port Vale is a fantastic place to be considering they've just been promoted. And there was, of course, that fear of teams get promoted. Wasn't a really quick transfer window for Port Vale. They did improve players and did bring players in eventually, but I think it took a little bit of time. Port Vale now finishing 18th. That's where they do finish. End of season form wasn't great. Last 5 games, they lost 4. So again, I know actually in a weird way, Clarke wasn't in charge for at least 3 of those, but we did see Clarke there for the majority of it. Putting their caretaker manager in didn't make sense. So where would we put Darrell Clarke? I know he's not there, but if we had to put his time there, I would still say, I still say it's solid. I actually think his sacking was slightly harsh. I know things were a little bit tedious come the end of it, but I still think when you look at Port Vale and their expectation, because when we're weighing up things like ranking managers, expectation is really important. I've just seen someone say below par. Excuse me, it really could be below par. It could be. And because he's been sacked, it makes sense to put him in there. But I still think, strength to sack him, solid is good. But the lower end, I think I agree. Didn't deserve to get sacked before the end of the season. No, I do. I think it was a strange decision. Stayed up, so job done. Yeah, just seemed disrespectful. I think, look, the second half of the season was a little bit of an issue, and that's the reason why they pulled the trigger. But I think generally Port Vale, their expectation, which when I say ranking managers, what are the criteria? What's the checklist, if you like? Expectation is one that has to be ticked if you're going to be in the top tiers, of course, and that's almost the biggest one. Expectation for Port Vale was to stay safe if possible. And they definitely did that. And while he was in charge, they were safe quite early on. I know they got dragged into it come the end of it, and that's probably why his time is slightly tarnished when you look at the reason why he was sacked. But on a general basis, I think it probably is still solid. I could be wrong. Maybe want to change come the end. Easily, he's the best in the league. A lot of Schumacher chat will come on to him shortly. He is near the end. Very, very good for retention. Sorry, but it's the truth. Right, let's move on to John Coleman. This one will be quite a quick one because unfortunately he did get relegated with Accrington Stanley. And again, it's difficult because John Coleman is a fantastic experienced manager that knows League One very, very well. And for a long time, Accrington have been punching above their weight. They have been higher, of course, in higher than mid-table across the season. Top 10 has been a really good season for Accrington over the years. This season, though, a little bit frustrating recruitment wise, big mistakes, and ultimately it's ended in relegation. So there is a real problem there for John Coleman and having to rebuild now. Almost an opportunity to reset. I think when they lost like to Colby Bishop in the summer, they definitely did not invest and reinvest into it. At number 9, we saw their goal scoring ability was just not there. And we've seen Dion Charles and Colby Bishop be really good strikers for Accrington. And when they left the club, and we can see now when they're not at the club, and you don't bring in a striker that can score goals, you're going to be forced into a relegation battle. We've seen it. It's a running trend. Cole Stockton wasn't scoring goals for Morecambe. They've been dragged into it. Oxford were dragged into it. We didn't have a striker or one that was scoring a lot of goals, or let's say at least plus 15, to be honest. Again, same with Accrington. There's a running theme there. You've got to have a goal scorer and somebody that's going to put the ball into the back of the net. And over the years, Accrington have had that. That's a big reason why they have been in those fantastic positions. When you look at budget, when you look at size of football club, I don't like talking about size of football club, but I think it is the truth. They have been punched above their weight. This season, maybe a bit too much off. That's definitely, if you watch Jaffin, a Samism. Bit off too much. They can chewed off too. What's the same? That's why we do it live. So you can see some of the outtakes that happens. They've maybe fallen a little bit short to their recent positions. That's fair to say. I'm still going to say probably. I know it's harsh. I like John Coleman. I think he knows League One so well, and he has been a great servant to League One. I'm probably going to say bit off more than they can chew. That's the one, Jacob. Thank you very much. I knew what I wanted to say. I knew what I wanted to say. There he is. Everyone's just sort of coming in there with their sayings that they knew. It's good that you knew what I meant, isn't it? It's good that you knew what I meant. So I'm going to go bottom tier for John Coleman, unfortunately. I know it's a little bit harsh. I like him, but I think when you relegate a side, you probably are automatically put in there. So I'm going to go in that one. It could be below par if I'm being really nice, but I'm not in a good mood. I am in a good mood, but I'm not in a good mood for managing and managing managers, if you like. So I'm going to go forget it happened for John Coleman. Right then, let's move on to the Shrewsbury gaffer that is Steve Cottrell. I think he's done a fantastic job. Steve Cottrell has been at Shrewsbury for quite a while, but we've seen a Shrewsbury side this season be really competitive. They did fall off come the end of the season. Again, similar to Port Vale, exactly the same last 5 games, 4 defeats from the last 5. And that was a real kick in the teeth because they were really competitive. They're playing a much better brand of football. I thought their recruitment in the summer was really promising, encouraging, refreshing. They were bringing in players that they weren't normally recruiting, players that are ready to sort of look at League One as it is, but also make that step up and push into at least the top 10. And if they can give it a little challenge for top 6, there's potential there. And for a little, almost, I'd say 2-3 weeks, Shrewsbury were hovering around that. And the points tally would suggest that they had a little bit of a chance. It was an outsider's chance, let's be frank, but it was still a chance. And in League One, and as open as it is at sometimes, a chance is a chance that you just take. So, very good for Shrewsbury. Says, as injuries ruined their season, they could have pushed for the playoffs if they had more players fit. And that's important as well. Expectation, circumstance, season state. And again, season state comes down to injuries and how it panned out, maybe that you couldn't predict and at different moments. Again, those last couple of games, last 5 games where the form did drop off, the chance of a top 6 finish and a really competitive top 10 finish was over. So they were slightly on the beach, and that, again, favoured some teams, definitely didn't favour Shrewsbury. And by the way, their running was terrible when it comes to their opposition. They're facing so many sides that either had so much to play for, well, they had so much to play for, but also whether that's at the top end or the bottom end. So I'm going to go with, I think it's very good. I think it probably is very good for Steve Cottrell. I think it is very good. It could be solid if I'm being a little bit harsh, but I think the improvements they've made, this brand of football was much improved. Like I said, the recruitment and that general squad was in a much better place, and they were being a real upset for lots of sides. And you look at where they were last season, again, over quite a few seasons, been hovering around the bottom 4, a much improved Shrewsbury side, an outfit now that I think can be looked at next season with the right additions. I know they've just taken the Cheltenham director of football as well, so they're going to have a bit of a structure change when it comes to recruitment strategy. I know Steve Cottrell's been through a lot as an individual as well. He was ill at one point, wasn't he? So what he's dealt with on a personal level, to be back on the dugout and to see that type of Shrewsbury performance from him, I think is very, very good. So I'm going to go very good, funnily enough, for Steve Cottrell. Shrewsbury down to 10 fit players when they played Argyle. Exactly. I think it was their bench. They had about 3 players. They didn't even have any young players on that bench, I believe. I remember scrolling down. We spoke about them in the roundup, and I think they had 3 or 4 subs. It was a really thin squad, and that was a real problem. But like I said, if they recruit well in the summer and then get themselves into a position where they can be stronger in depth, who knows? He's definitely a fantastic manager and certainly does deserve credit when we're doing this tier list. Let's move on to Paul Warne of Derby County, a controversial one. This is going to get a few people riled up, and it's going to give certainly and provide a good conversation. Jacob, 4 subs. I know it was 3 or 4, Jacob. Yeah, it was a really depleted squad. So with Paul Warne, where are we going to go with it? Where are we going to go with Paul Warne? Not literally. He can't go anywhere. He probably doesn't know this has ever happened. But for the context of this, where do we put Paul Warne? I've just seen Dyche has put in a paragraph there about Derby. We'll come back to that. I will definitely read that. I want to hear Derby fans, of course. That's why doing it live is important. But I can give his stats here. Paul Warne, 1.68 points per game, 76 points. Of course, just missed out on the top six, a defeat to Wednesday on the final day. Again, a penalty there that slightly, well, it cost their season to an extent, didn't it? I know Peterborough beat Barnsley, and that was a big problem for them as well. But when you look at Bolton, when you look at Derby and you look at what Paul Warne has done there, it was always going to be a challenge. He wasn't the manager from the start. That's also important to say as well. And he was almost brought in as, I was speaking to Tom on the phone earlier from 4-0 written all over it. And we spoke about Paul Warne and what he was brought in to do. And he was brought in to use his League One experience and his successful League One experience to provide the success that Derby County want. And that is to get out of League One as soon as possible. So, look, it's difficult. I think it's between two. I think it's between solid and below par. He's had to deal with difficult things. He didn't have the summer. And again, Liam Rosner was in charge for the summer, but I think that recruitment was wait for the takeover and then bring in the free transfers. There was definitely restrictions. January again, of course, restrictions. I know he was in charge for that window, but still there were levels to the recruitment area that he couldn't touch, and that was bringing in players on either higher wages or transfer fees. That was not an option. So there was, and when he came in, he knew that. That's important to say as well, but it was difficult, and he had to deal with, again, difficulties that Bolton, I keep saying Bolton, that Derby, maybe it's the white kit, or maybe it's because I've got the list of teams in front of me and I keep looking at Bolton and then saying it, that Derby, and he knew when he walked into that job, but he's a very, very established manager in League One. He's someone that's provided great success for Rotherham over the years, and he knows League One, and he knows exactly what it takes to be promoted. Let's come to the comment. As a Derby fan, I'd say below par for Warne. I think playoffs had to be a minimum, and he didn't get there. Give him the summer window. I do think he's the right man to get us up next season. Definitely. I probably would say below par. I think it's between two, but I would sway to below par. Penalty cost their season, but they shouldn't have been in a position to allow that to happen. Below par, he didn't do enough before the Wednesday game to secure a spot. Players that are championship quality at worst. I think when you've got a squad with David McGoldrick, with Cashin, for example, other names in there that have completely left my brain. Hayden Roberts from Brighton's a fantastic player. Horan, of course, is a great example. They're coming to me slowly and slightly. Mendes Lang's, of course, a physical, strong, quick winger that probably could play in the Championship. Certainly a top-end League One player. Buckhusen, Sibley. There's players in there that should be in the playoffs and should be finishing in those positions. I would agree with that. So that being said, missing out was difficult. Frustrations in terms of restrictions, but he knew that. I'm going to go below par for Paul Warne, but I'd say it's the top end of it. It's harsh. I feel it is harsh, but I would go below par. They had an expectation, maybe not at the start of the season, but definitely when he came in, the expectation was, well, we've got some fantastic players here. You're a very good manager. This is where we want to get to. And he didn't fulfill that. So I would say below par. Paul Warne tried to play the Rotherham style with a different kind of team, which is not great management. That is true, and adapting and having to look at the players that you've got and change that style of play that, of course, we know is very successful. I can't completely blame him for doing it because he came in and he knows League One and he wants to try and get his ideas, get his philosophy over to the group of players quickly because he knows that is a style that is successful, that he's seen great success from. But I do think you are right in the fact that maybe as a manager in that position, you do the opposite and you go, right, this is what we've got. This is how we're going to deal with it. And this is what fits this group of players, maybe. But he's got the summer now, and that's going to be interesting. We've got 97 people watching right now. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you subscribe. We've got, I think, 4 more videos, League One this season. The big one at the end of the season after the playoff final is going to be ranking every League One club season. So different to this because this is just managers. We're looking at clubs, and that's going to make it really fascinating. So clubs, that'll be the final live stream of the season. But you know what I'm trying to say. We've got a really special video coming out in the middle of the summer. But of course, there will be naturally a bit of a drop-off because the season and the football is going to come to an end. Drake Tong says, come on, Wardy. Sunshine. Is that what he says? Shun. He meant sun. I thought he meant sunshine. I mean, I am a rare sunshine, Jake, to you in particular. Hopefully you're doing well. We've still got Lincoln to come, Jake. So you've got Lincoln discussion still to be part of. 106 people watching right now. Fantastic, amazing stuff. Please make sure you do leave a like. Let's go to the next one. Dino of Burton Albion. I think straight away I know I'm going to put Dino, and that's going to be very good. He came in to a Burton side who were struggling. Jake says, you are my ray of sunshine. I saw it from a distance and I thought it did say the sun, and I instantly thought ray of sunshine. Jake, I love you lots. Also says Dino is manager of the year nominee for Burton. Were awful at the start of the season, looking to sink into League Two fast. He turned the ship around and they started getting some amazing results, like beating Sheffield Wednesday. That is true. That was a really good result at the end of the season. But I think what he's done is transformed Burton, like you say there, that Otto has just pointed out. The side that he inherited under Jimmy Ford Hasselbank were terrible, especially defensively. They were shipping so many goals. I thought they were the first team to be relegated. At the start of the season, they were losing. They were considering 4 or 5 goals a game. They lost. I think it was it Lincoln Burton? Was that the game that was like 6-3 or 6-4? I could be completely wrong. I know Lincoln were involved. I think Burton were the other team. Diamond hat trick or 4 goals for Diamond. Could even been a 5. But it was that game, and they were conceding so many goals. It was a joke, and it was going to get them relegated. Because going forward, there was potential there. There was potential. I thought a really good January turned them around. But I think what Dino's done there is coached that side and turned into a really defensive, a more defensive-minded side, which isn't difficult. I think just putting anyone in the back line would have helped. And I think then stopping it and being hard to beat first, and then again you can work from that, because defensively that was just a one-way trip to League Two, and he definitely improved them and definitely kept them up. And I think at one point it was nailed on that we're going to get relegated. He came in, he certainly did improve them. You remember the actual game of the season? It was Bristol Rovers. That was it. Bristol Rovers. It wasn't even Burton. My bad, Jake. My bad. That's embarrassing, isn't it? I just thought lots of games that they conceded loads about, and I presumed it was Burton. It wasn't. It was Rovers. 6-3. Well, bad example, but you know what I'm trying to say. They conceded a lot of goals at the start of the season, and he definitely shored them up defensively. So, and he kept them up against all the odds. So very good. And it could even be the top tier, but I wouldn't say that because they did still finish in 17th, which I'm not saying is a bad achievement considering where they were, 15th, sorry. But even still, I'm going to go very good for Dino. I think I've got his points per game. I might not. I do. 1.41, 56 points. 1.41, really, really good. Really good. Right, let's go to Michael Duff. I saw some love about Michael Duff earlier on in the live show. So we're going to bring back that love for Michael Duff because he's going to finish in a really high position, I feel. It could even be the first manager in that top tier. I can bring you his PPG, points per game. 1.87. Of course, there is still a chance of promotion. There's a bit of a risk in doing this before the playoff final, but I thought we've got to get a video out on the Sunday. Let's do it now. And it won't change too much. I think whatever happens, Michael Duff, to get to a playoff final is a fantastic achievement. So I wouldn't change my thoughts on it too much just because we don't know that final outcome. Even still, I still think for Barnsley and Michael Duff, it's got to be the top tier. I think it has. Plays a really, really great style of football. A really great style of football. A bit more direct, but more high pressing than you'd probably see with a lot of clubs. High pressing stats, if you get around to looking at them, if you're a stats guru or nerd, I'd probably say more like I am, you'll see that the stats numbers for Barnsley under Michael Duff are so high. They play a relentless front-footed style of play. Wing-backs, crucial. I think a midfield 3, Phillips, Connell and Kane have been fantastic. Front 2, Devontae Cole, Norwood, lots of names. Tedic is the other one, isn't it? They've got lots of players that are crucial in the way that he wants to play, and that is full throttle, if you like, steamrolling football. So I think he's top tier. I think he is. He could still secure promotion. It's going to be a challenge. I think Wednesday and Barnsley feel it's going to be a challenge, that game, whichever angle you're looking at it from. But I'm going to go top tier. I thought over 2 legs against Bolton, we saw what they're all about. The first leg, they were not fantastic, but did the job and got a really important goal. And in the end, what was crucial, a really, really important 1-1 draw. In the second leg, of course, they had to deal with what they had to defensively, but that wasn't too much, but took their chance going forward. And again, they did have chances across that match as well and over those 2 legs. So I'd go with top tier. Is he my manager of the season? He could well be. He's not, but he could well be. He's definitely in that top tier, though. Let me know where you'd put Michael Duff. Right, then let's move on to the next manager. Let's go to Big Dunk, who joined just before January. I could be wrong. I want to say just before January. It's around that time, wasn't it? Look, they came rock bottom. They did come rock bottom. And when doing manager rankings, it's difficult because he wasn't the manager that started the season off. That was, of course, a really challenging first half of the campaign under, I think it was Burton that before, wasn't it? But again, they've been through quite a few managers. Of course, Rob Edwards was the manager that got them into League One in the first place. He moved on to Watford, doing fantastic things with Luton now. shows how good of a manager he was, and also shows how important a manager is that knows a group of players that, again, also were sold. I think when you look at expectation, Forest Green, it was going to be a real challenge. It was always going to be a fantastically ludicrous challenge when you look at the players that they lost in the summer, when you look at the manager being lost, and when things didn't improve, and when things in the end finishing rock bottom on a points tally of 27, conceding 89 goals, only scoring 31. When you look at goals conceded, they were rock bottom by a country mile. 89 is horrendous. Only winning 6 games out of 46, losing 31. I know he wasn't there for the entire season. Where would you put Duncan Ferguson in that live chat? Do let me know. But I think Duncan Ferguson is going to be a good manager. I think he's going to be a good coach. He's certainly a motivator. He's certainly ambitious, and he probably could have taken another job. I think there's been rumours in the past of him turning down championship jobs, and that just shows I think he is and has got a really good pedigree. I think for a long time, every time Everton sacked a manager, he was linked to be, a Premier League manager, and that shows I think there is a real level of, I think, potential in there. Right now, he is a manager in League Two, obviously, as of now. So I'm gonna. I really need your help. Actually, I really do need your help. Where would you put Duncan Ferguson? Is it the bottom tier? Is it forget it happened, or is it below par? It's forget it even happened, isn't it? I think it is. I think statistically, they did have some good results. I remember watching that game against Wednesday. Of course, that was a really good, fantastic result. And potentially, with an outside chance of a turnaround when it comes to their survival hopes, but it wasn't. So I'm going to go with forget it happened for that one. That's tough though, because I think difficult circumstances. Join a club that were bottom of the league, and that there's going to be a real task, a real difficult task. Of course, didn't end in the way that he would have wanted it to. But it's a time to rebuild at Forest Green, and I think it's fair to say Duncan Ferguson will be at the heart of that. Let's move on, shall we, to Dean Holden of Charlton Athletic. Dean Holden had a points per game of 1.52, joined after the Bengala era that ended pretty terribly. 62 points for Charlton, another quite underwhelming season. But when you look at Dean Holden and what he's brought to Charlton, there has been a level of improvement. I think there is a much more strong positive feeling towards Dean Holden than there has been over the previous managers. I think Johnny Jackson was there last season. It's hard to keep up, isn't it? Then before that, they had Adkins. Then they had Bengana, now Dean Holden. I think that's the order. So in the end, they ended up with Dean Holden. And I think we have seen Dean Holden be a really, really good manager and a good coach that will provide, I think, long-term, really good time to Charlton. That could be a statement that gets clipped up and laughed at, but I think he is showing signs of improvement. He's going to need a really good summer transfer window. He's going to need to be backed. He needs this takeover at Charlton to happen really quickly so he can sort those plans out. He wants to rebuild and strip that club apart. I think that's fair to say. And structurally, that's also going to be really crucial as well. But like I said, I think he is showing that he's a good coach. I think there is a level of positivity around Charlton, which, let's be honest, in recent years has been a rarity. But we can now see the direction they want to go in. Like I said, that's going to come down to the takeover. That's going to come down to a really positive summer transfer window in which they need to be aggressive and they need to bring players in that's going to fit Dean Holden's style. Give him the summer. Give him time. There has been improvement. I think it's been solid for Dean Holden. I know it's not been a solid season for Charlton, and if we're doing it for clubs without spoiling it, I'm going to spoil something. Charlton's position, it would still be below par. It would be, because you look at the size of the football club and look at where they want to get to. But you still feel as though Dean Holden, he's still solid when you look at what he's inherited and the way that he has improved that side. So I'm going to go solid for Dean Holden. Do let me know. I can bring up your thoughts as well. Very good. Has done it absolutely brilliant with his squad. Lack of investment during this period of uncertainty. Dean Lewington has come in. I think that is the same Dean Lewington. And I'm going to check now while we're live. This is the same Dean Lewington that was Scott Tyner's my dad, was it? And then Liam Manning's my stepdad. And now he's just Dean Lewington. He's been a part of the stream for quite a while. I've been a good member of the channel for quite a while. Unfortunately, he is an MK Dons fan. And they won't be in League One next season, unfortunately. We'll come on to Mark Jackson in just a second. So stay tuned for that. Excuse me. Right, let's go. Well, we've done that. We have done Dean Holden. Let's go Kieran McKenna. If we can sort of get this really annoying cough that wants to be there but isn't fully there, making it even more difficult to speak. Let's go Kieran McKenna. Let's chat Kieran McKenna. Let's talk all things Tractor Boys and McKenna. I think we all know where we're going to put him, don't we? I think we all know where we're going to put Kieran McKenna. He certainly is a Manager of the Year nominee. I think the style of play, the league position, the promotion, the end product, and the final goal has to be in that top tier. I speak so much about Kieran McKenna and have done across the season. I think he's done a fantastic job. I think he's a brilliant manager when it comes to young, aggressive coach. I think he wants, not aggressive in terms of punching people up, but I think he's quite aggressive in his thoughts and how he wants his side to play, and great at visualizing and then putting into practice exactly what he wants to see when it comes to a fast, high press, suffocating, brilliant brand of football. And of course, you can have a great brand of football, but can you get results? He can. Was he heavily backed financially? Of course he was. But, you know, that comes with a side that have got money, that can spend money, and that he can get the best out of. So for that reason, you can't tarnish his position because of the fact he's heavily backed compared to others. He's been dealt with that. You know, he's been given those ingredients, and he has been fantastic with them. So yeah, definitely in that top tier. Manager of the Year, he's been produced the best brand of football in League One. The stats speak for themselves. I think expected goals, top tier. Goals, top tier. Yes, but he also had the biggest budget and the best squad in the league. So has he all the tools the manager would want? That is true, and that's the argument, I'd say. He still spent the money on the right players. He did. The recruitment was spot on. I know it's not just him. They've got a really good, again, structure there. Points per game, 2.13. No doubt where he's going to go. Definitely top tier. 2.13 is incredible. 98 points. Yeah, no doubt Kieran McKenna is in the top tier here, Manager of the Year. Let's go Mark Jackson. Where are we going to go with you? Sacked, of course, at the end of the season. Forget it happened. In fact, we'll just forget MK Dons this season happened. I think that'll probably be where MK Dons are feeling as well. He came in, inherited a squad that, again, was struggling. Of course, Liam Manning left, who's, funnily enough, the next manager we're going to speak about is now Oxford, of course. Mark Jackson, coming back to him, difficult. Really, really difficult. But ultimately, at one point, I thought it was going to be fine. I think he thought it was going to be fine. And then some really difficult results and bad results against sides that, of course, were down there with them. And it just ended in disaster. It ended in relegation. And, of course, he lost his job as well. Would he have kept his job if he had kept them up? For sure. It would have been a really good opportunity, I think, for them to rebuild and definitely sort out what was a terrible, terrible summer transfer window. Was he part of that? No. Is that slightly harsh to judge him on that? Yes. In fact, I'm not even going to judge him on that. But ultimately, he did relegate them. I think, actually, it would have been interesting to see if he could bring them back up in League Two. Sacking him felt a little bit harsh. Dean Lewington says, forget it happened. Yeah. Yeah, it probably is in that one. Right, let's go to Liam Manning of Oxford United. Again, this is where we're going to look at things very differently, because if we were doing ranking football clubs, Oxford would be probably the bottom tier. Definitely below par, but I would go lower than that. But Liam Manning came in and he kept us up. He kept us up. I know we weren't in the relegation zone when he joined us, but we could easily have been. We could easily have been. And on another season, when you look at the run we went on, 22 games without a win, I think we could easily have been in a relegation. We were in a relegation fight, in a relegation zone. I was going to say dogfight, but I think we were well and truly a dogfight come the end of the season. And Liam Manning inherited a squad that were in a dogfight. And it took a while. Defensively, organisation, much better. That was a big thing for Liam Manning. And the question mark was there, is he the right man to keep us up? Long term, I think he's a brilliant rebuild manager. Somebody who is a really exciting coach who will bring, hopefully, success in the long term. But short term, is he that dogfight manager? I think we've seen that he is. So I think it's solid. Could be biased, but I think what he's done is a solid job. I'd say a very good job, but I don't think he's been a very good season. He hasn't been there for the entire campaign. To judge him on that is, again, not fair. But I'd still say solid. I'd say solid. He came in, he kept us up, and that's the main thing. That's what we wanted. Manning solid. Good job, Manning. We sacked him too quick, says Dean Lewington. That's interesting, actually. That is interesting. That is a thought there from an MK Dons fan. Of course, yeah, they did sack him. So quite early on, but you were in a very difficult position. It did look like a downward spiral to League Two as a final destination, but you did sack him. We took advantage of that in that way. And of course, he kept us up, which I think is a solid job. Right, let's go to Mark Kennedy of Lincoln City. I've got his points per game as well. Of course, joined in the summer, 1.35 points per game, which actually is good, to be honest, when you look at others. 62 points. I mean, it's a points per game that's middle tier. It's a middle tier points per game, which fits perfectly to the thing we're doing today, which is ranking managers. It's a middle tier position, a middle tier points per game. There's going to be a bit of an adjustment. There's going to be a bit of growing pain and transition. But I think we saw that there's elements to improve on, but also really positive elements. So for that reason, I think it's still been solid. I wouldn't say very good. It's been good. And that's why I put it in solid. I wouldn't go any higher than that. Like I said, there's certainly things that need to be improved on. Beating teams in the lower end of the region of the league table is certainly an area that needs to be sorted out. Top end wise, they're fine. Absolutely fine when you look at sides like Plymouth, they beat this season, and others. But you look at the bottom end, they dropped really silly points. And that was the reason why they're probably not competing in that top 10. Actually, that could be an awful take. They finished 10th. No, 11th. Phew. It could have been a horrible one. Close, though. Not a great take. I meant to say top. I mean, it's still top 10 because there is a bit of a gap. In fact, there's a 7-point gap between themselves and 10th Charlton. So that point does stand. Either that or, even higher into the top 6 where they were a couple of years ago when they got to the playoff final. They're way off that, but there certainly are elements there that you can go, right, that's good. Can we improve on that? That's not so good. Can we learn lessons and get better at that? Again, he's going to have another summer transfer window to fine tune and bring more players in, hopefully with, again, a slightly bigger budget and something else that they can work with, that he can then work with going forward. I still say solid. I think he has done a solid job. Agree to then confirm, says Toxic Girl. I think he's done a very good job to Jake. Now, that's awkward because I've got to speak to Jake throughout the entire week and he's not going to let this go. In fact, the summer now. Would you say, Jake, that that's a position to put him in? Would you say it should be higher than solid? I think it's the top end. If it's a consolation, Jake, I think it's the top end of solid. I do. But I think the thing is, you would say he's done a very good job, wouldn't you? If you're sort of saying it as a sentence, you'd say very good job. But there we go. So that's interesting. I'd say, look, consolate. If it makes you feel better, I could put it there. I wouldn't. Very good, very good. I'm putting managers there like Ferguson and in Everett. We're in the top 6. Those type of positions. I can't put him in that tier with those managers. Steve Cottrell maybe could be solid and not very good. But I think when you look at where they've been in previous seasons and the improvement, that's why I've put him there. Dino pretty much saved them from what looked like a really unpleasant end. Didn't drop any points to Oxford, though. No, we didn't. But, But there we go. Not many sides did, to be there. Not many sides did. Right, let's go to Darren Moore. There's a lot of Sheffield Wednesday fans in the chat right now. Darren Moore, get your thoughts in. Instead of, let's do Darren Moore and just now go with where we're going to go with it. Go with the tier that you'd go with for Darren Moore, because this is really interesting. Should we wait until after the playoff final against Barnsley? Potentially. But I still think he's got to be in that top tier. I think he probably has to be in there because at one point, maybe not. But that result alone, result alone against Peterborough in the second leg was immense. Astronomically incredible. Moore was manager of the year candidate until late wobble pushed him into very good, but that unbelievable playoff turnaround pushes him back up to the top category for me. Mobby, that's exactly how I'd look at it. Exactly how I'd look at it. I think that game alone, the ingredients that provided mentality, character, spirit, game plan, that alone, he provided a miracle. He was the manager of a side that provided a footballing comeback that will go down for years and years and years and years. And a 23-game unbeaten run. There was a wobble. There was a little bottle that at one point was a big bottle. After the Peterborough game, a gigantic bottle. But now he's decreased the size of the bottle. Still, should he have been in the top 2? Or should Wednesday have been in the top 2? Yes. They dropped silly points. Ipswich, Plymouth, of course, caught up with them. Well, Ipswich did. Plymouth have always been sort of just behind them or above them. But now you're looking at a side that could not easily, but easily because there's only one other team going for it, get promoted. Not going to be easy, but you know what I'm trying to say. There's a great position now. One game to go. It's in touching distance. Can't call more Manager of the Year candidate. Remember to say it's nominee, not Manager of the Year. That's where there's more in there. We will give our Manager of the Year at the end. Delusional to put him anywhere else other than top tier. Yeah, interesting. Record season all round. Any other season, a team getting 96 points and being no question the manager will be Manager of the Year. So got to be Manager of the Year nominee. Unfortunately, the context of how it happens dampens the achievement. Andrew James, I couldn't have put it better myself. It dampens it. It dampens it because they didn't quite get over the line. Seems to have joined at a good point. Hope you're doing well, mate. Jack, it's great to see you. I'm doing well. Pingo's just joined. Hello, everybody. Manager of the Year, Darren Moore had racial abuse and defeated squad. And what a comeback. Still humble after the game. Sue always comes in here with fantastic takes and fantastic opinions. And I would agree. I agree. I think that comeback alone, that achievement and that game alone, because it was one of my favourite ever games of football that I've watched, and I wasn't even involved directly with Wednesday or Peterborough, it's got to be in the top team. It's got top team. They were a top team on the night. And you'd say across the season, to be fair, but certainly the top tier. I'm going to say Darren Moore is a Manager of the Year nominee. I was pretty certain of that. The next one, well, I think we know what we're going to go with Stephen Schumacher. Don't need to worry about it too much. In fact, going back to Darren Moore briefly, really quickly. Points per game, 2.09. Fantastic points per game. I know context where they were difficult, but a points per game of 2.09 and 96 points is fantastic. And that points per game, that points tally, I don't like it as much as others like it. I don't like the in another season one too much because it wasn't another season. It was this season, but I get it. I get the point. It's still fantastic numbers. Definitely in the top tier. Plymouth, Stephen Schumacher, 2.2 points per game, 101 points. I think we know we're going to put Stephen Schumacher, definitely Manager of the Year nominee, and he is going to be my Manager of the Year. Without spoiling it too much, he definitely will be in there. He definitely will be in there. Only one answer. One game doesn't make a season, but one game could make Darren Moore's season. Definitely. Mr. Shark, Derpy Shark, in fact. Darren Moore readied the troops up before the match on Thursday, made me feel comfortable and made me feel maybe want to go to Hillsborough that night. It was a fantastic atmosphere. Schumacher is Manager of the Year 100%. The squad shouldn't be where it is, especially after a tough January transfer window. Losing Morgan Whittaker, of course, was a big blow, but I think their window in January and especially in the summer was fantastic, and he's done a fantastic job. He's won them league. I think it's a blueprint and exciting. I don't want to repeat what I've said in lots of other episodes, but it is a blueprint what Plymouth have done when it comes to not spending millions and millions, but oozing great quality out of a very high-spirited, clear style of play, but clear plan, structure-wise. He ticks all of those boxes. So definitely Manager of the Year nominee, and he is Stephen Schumacher, the winner of Manager of the Year. Right, John Massinio of Portsmouth. I know Jack Hancock was in the live chat, I believe. Hopefully he still is. It'd be weird if he just joined and then Pompey was next and he left. He might well have done. I wouldn't blame him for it. I wouldn't. But knowing that John Massinio hasn't been there, he can provide us great insight. John Massinio, of course, hasn't been there the entire season. So there is an asterisk next to his name, but still 1.7 points per game, 70 points. Took a side from 16th, 15th position, I want to say, around that area for sure, and took them to, at one point, a really promising position of a top 6 outcome at the end. But it wasn't to be. It wasn't to be. They fell short, some disappointing results in the latter stage. I think that Oxford game, and then from then on, was pretty mediocre, and slight concerns were there. So, yeah, solid. I probably would say solid. Jack Hancock has put solid. I think it has been solid. It's either if it was before, if he carried on like he was before the Oxford game through the entire season, very good. But I think there's slight issues going forward. There needs to be an improvement. There's slight patterns of play in the offensive area have been a bit of a letdown. And we've seen them be a little bit blunt and lost for ideas at times. And that's a slight concern. But I think on the whole, I think it has been solid for John Massinio. Lots of work over the summer. And then, again, a bit of a roll the dice and see what happens next season. Still lots to learn about John Mousinho. Very young coach, very inexperienced, but I think signs of positive things in areas, but also lessons to be learned. Right, Wade Elliott of Cheltenham, I'd say been very good. I'd say it's been very good. I know they finished in 16th, but at one point relegation was certainly on the cards, and he was so close to getting sacked, stayed, and they went on a fantastic run and have now been a side that were comfortable and have been comfortable for quite a few weeks. It's either top end of solid or very good for me. I'd say it's either, top end of solid or very good, because, like I said, Wade Elliott was really close to being sacked, and that could be a reason why you don't put him in very good, because he did have a really bad start to the season. If we look at the entire season, not just the end of it, that's important to sort of look at it from a broader perspective. But I'd still say very good. I'd still say very good. I think when you look at season state and look at where they were, just keep them in the league is fantastic, and he's done that. So I would go very good. Could easily have been relegated and kept them up. Maybe been a little bit generous, but I'm going to go very good. Finally, the final one, Matt Bloomfield. Got a bit of a really annoying cough. Matt Bloomfield of Wycombe Wanderers joined mid-season, took over from Gareth Ainsworth, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. 1.07, 69 points they finished on. There was still, when he joined, a chance for the top 6, but that didn't happen. That will go eventually. But I think it has been below par. I haven't been fully convinced. He's still a young manager. Did well at Colchester, took over this job. He knows the football club very, very well. He was there as a player, as a captain. He's now there as a manager. So naturally, that it was trying to keep the trend of Gareth Ainsworth, which I understand. I think we all get the reason for that. But it hasn't been fantastic. It hasn't been the same. But there was always going to be that transition and change when you lose such an important man and manager as Gareth Ainsworth, who was the fabric of that football club. And now he's moved on. There's going to be, of course, an adjustment, but he hasn't set the world alight. I would say it has been below par, because in the end, they weren't really anywhere near the top 6. I say anywhere near. That they finished in 9th, but points tally-wise, 69 to 77. There's a large gap there that was a difficult one to catch up on. Never thought Ainsworth would leave Wycombe, nor did I, but he did, and I think we've seen a bit of a drop-off there. Cough, go away, says Melissa Anderson. Yeah. Cough needs to go away, Melissa. Sacking him would be footballing suicide. I think I missed the wrong person. Maybe. I don't quite know who sacking him would be suicide. I don't know if sacking Bloomfield would be suicide, to be honest. I wouldn't sack him, but I'm just saying I don't think it's that mad, that crazy. No one that we could reasonably bring will be better than Moore. Back to Wednesday, I seem to. Gareth Ainsworth leaving killed our season. Bloomfield just isn't good enough. I think there's still maybe things to come from Bloomfield. I think you've got to be patient in that sense, but I do get what you mean. It still is slightly concerning with the fact that there was a drop off. Jack Hancock, I can one up on your cough. And he said something very, very different there. One up on your cough. I currently have tonsillitis. Not a deal. Jack, I hope you get better. I've had tonsillitis. This isn't a competition, Jack, but I have had tonsillitis before, and I'm trying to show empathy here by saying that it's horrible, and I feel your pain. I hate tonsillitis, but I think that's probably what most people would say. I think loving tonsillitis would be arguably more weird. So, yeah. Jack, on a serious note, hopefully you do feel better soon. Wycombe should have bought in Lee Bowyer, or Bower. Either way, I know what you're trying to say, the ex-Charlton manager. Yeah, okay, look, I'm going to go with that. That's my tier list. Give me your thoughts. Is that the right tier list? Let's sum up by saying, forget it even happened. We've got Derek Adams, Accrington's John Coleman, Ferguson, and Mark Jackson. Below par, Paul Warren, Joe Barton, and Bloomfield. Solid, Kennedy, Exeter, Goldwell. Sorry, that isn't his name. Mark Bonner, Scott Brown, Daryl Clark, Dean Holden, Liam Manning, John Mousinho. Very good. Ian Everett, Darren Ferguson, Steve Cottrell, Dino, Wade Elliott. Top tier, Manager of the Year nominee, Stephen Schumacher, who is my Manager of the Year, by the way, Michael Duff, Kieran McKenna, and Darren Moore. That is what I'm going to go with. This was Manager rankings this season. That has been a really interesting interactive live show. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Of course, this will be going up as a video as well, so do drop your thoughts in the comment section down below. Have a fantastic rest of your Sunday. Hopefully I provided some entertainment for you on this Sunday evening, and we can now go on and have a promising, exciting, but not enough football for me kind of week. I will see you all very, very soon. Thank you so much, everybody that's got involved live. Of course, I'll be replying to those in the comments as well. Take care, everybody. Have a very, very good rest of your Sunday and week ahead. Take care.